This is the conference held at the National Council of Italy on February 23rd, 2009. And I want to give you some of the people in our organization. This was done in 2009 during the celebration of Darwin. This was the 200th anniversary of his birth and the 150th anniversary of his book on evolution. So this was the 159th anniversary, 2009. And this gentleman here is the vice president of the National Research Council of Italy. This is Mr. Tessat, who is a mining engineer. The next one, from left to right, we're going here. That's Mr. Tessat, a French mining engineer. This is Guy Berthaud, the sedimentologist. All these people gave lectures. And this is Hugh Owen of the Colby Center for the Study of Creation. And this is the two translators, because we have 40-some people from a number of different countries, from Poland to Germany to Italy to France and the United States. The conference was held in English. This is rather important. Long-range radiometric dating methods give meaningless ages in the millions and billions of years. Radioactive elements are present within the mineral matrix itself, the volcanic materials, and several conditions can influence how much radioactive material can be retained, which by taking the ratios of the parent atom to the daughter element, isotopes, these are isotopes, that you can get true age, they claim. But Madam Dr. Marie Claire von Osterwick, this is from her proposed technical paper, which was eventually given in Germany in 2009. These are the variations that can cause these isotopic ratios to change and give you all kind of weird ages. So chemical composition in the material, mineralogy composition of the mineral, crystal structure of the mineral. She's a mineralogist. She knows what she's talking about. And she lectured, and she was in Africa for many years at the Belgian Congo, studying the area, and she came to the conclusion that the flood of Noah caused all the problems and the discovery of the ape-like creatures and human-like creatures that were really apes. I've covered in a book called Bones of Contention. The grain size of the various crystals in the mineral, a smaller grain size means there are more grain boundaries per unit volume. Very technical stuff. The exposure of mineral to high temperature water, and that's something you can understand. If you have a flood of Noah and massive volcanic activity, that you're going to change the ratios of the isotopes to each other because of the vast amount of high temperature water moving at 1,000 miles per hour. Wow. Twice daily, it's a theory, twice daily exposure of mineral to weathering. The particular radioactive isotope present in the material will make a difference. Thus, now here's her conclusion. Thus, clocks reputed to produce absolute ages depend upon the above factors and therefore are neither absolute nor true ages. According to textbooks on the subject, the clocks should be insensitive to such conditions, but the time they register will change if conductions 1 to 7 vary. And as we discussed in the previous interview, Mount St. Helens gave ages in the range of 300,000 to, I think, 3 million years for potassium argon dating method. Yet the explosion happened in 1980. The same thing in California, a volcanic mountain there. The same thing in New Zealand. I mean, we can just do so much research, but they have the funds to do the research, but they pick what they want and shove the rest of it out of their papers. This just real quickly, megafauna is in the range of 10,000 years to roughly 40,000 years. Yet evolution theory claims the mastodons, which is part of the megafauna, are up to 4 million years old. And here we have dinosaurs in the range of 20K to 40K, roughly. And here the evolution theory claims 65 to 225 million years old. And our ages are for Cretaceous to Jurassic, and that's 65 to allegedly 150 million years old. Now with amber coal lignite, you get ranges of 45,000 to roughly 53,000 years using carbon-14 dating, when evolution theory claims upwards to 300 million years old. They ignore Noah's flood. Now, the reason for dinosaurs being a little younger than the amber, coal, and lignite is because trees grew longer. They aged to upwards to 1,000, 2,000 years, some of them. So when they were buried by Noah's flood, they had far less carbon-14 in them than the dinosaur bones, who only lived like ages of the mammals, 30,000, depending on whether they get eaten by another one or whether They die naturally.
Yeah, it made sense to me.
Well, the trees grew older. They had older ages when they were demolished by the flood of Noah. Their ages might have been in the hundreds to a couple thousand years because
Yeah,
creation
so
was 1,000 years earlier.
because the composition of the air right early in the pre-flood world was far lower carbon 14, and it built up over time.
That's correct. So when the carbon 14 is,
So the center of a tree would have far less carbon 14 in it than the outside, wouldn't it?
that's correct. Thank you for expounding on my brief explanation. Now, diamonds, which contains 99.9% carbon, are in the range of 55,000 to roughly 80,000 years based on the best equipment that is available for the accelerated mass spectrometer. Some AMS equipment cannot reach 60,000 years. Most of them are less than 50,000 years. Some of them get up to 80,000. Now, evolution theory claims that diamonds are in the range of 500 million upwards to several billion years old.
The diamonds would appear older because of the heat that's applied to them, wouldn't they? Because to form, they have to be very hot and high pressure. So that would likely...
I think the veins, like, they come up from the bowels of the earth, shall we say, 50,000 feet below or deeper. And as they come up, they pick up carbon 14. They're mainly carbon to begin with, but they pick up material from limestone and the rock strata that contain carbon 14 from the beginning of the earth. Okay. So they would contain even less than amber, coal, and lignite. Okay? They're very hot and they come up and they pick up old carbon 14.
Is there a way to speed up the decay of carbon 14 to nitrogen? Are there known ways that can speed up?
I don't know. I have no idea. I wouldn't think so because it's an established procedure for dating and they've been able to check it against Egyptian pharaohs, mummies, and wood from their boats.
Because often the big issue I've heard is leaching of carbon 14 away through water. Like I've heard of seals that are alive today that date to 40,000 years old and things like this, that kind of stuff.
Seals and clams and other shellfish appear to be older and is not being leached out of carbon 14. These critters eat. They have sources of food that come from ancient soils, which contain very low carbon 14. The examples that we gave you last time was like a live tree growing along an airport in Germany.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember, it was 10,000 years old, but it was a live tree. It was 10,000 years old because it had absorbed during its growth period of gases from the fossil, what they call the fossil record. Okay, these gases, oil and so forth, and they are very ancient in carbon 14 content. Even plant life in Montezuma's well in Arizona, actually a small lake, absorbs carbon dioxide to keep the plant alive from the water that contains ancient carbon dioxide because it's a limestone foundation. The limestone contains hardly any carbon 14, but it does contain some. So they got ages in the range of dinosaur bones, 17,000 to 24,000 years. So it's a matter of how the plant life or whatever becomes fossilized.
I think
the environment. What kind of environment? Okay.
Probably the important thing too is just the fact that there's any carbon 14 at all in them. It just gives an upper limit to the age. It doesn't actually really tell you the age. It just says, well, it can be maximum, say, with diamonds, they're 70,000 years or 60,000 years or something.
That's correct. The laboratories like to say that when you get an age and you've done all the pre-treatment work and everything, and you do not have a accelerated mass spectrometer, but use some other equipment, and you get what they call a greater than sign in front of the age. It's an indeterminate age. So they say this is the youngest age it could be.
Okay.
When you get limestone, date to limestone, you'll get an age of 48,000, 50,000 years for coal. That would be the youngest age you could get if you're using something other than an accelerated mass spectrometer.
Okay.
An accelerated mass spectrometer, I think you could get a greater than age when you get up around 80,000. They just don't know. They can't go any further than that with the equipment.
Okay.
And it's a marvelous piece of equipment. It counts every atom of each isotope. So the isotope of carbon 12, carbon 13, and carbon 14 is counted.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
So they get a more precise date, but the precision does not mean that that's the actual date. If
Mm.
we can show that the ages, real ages, are much younger for various reasons, okay, which we discussed already. This is a very complicated scenario, and I haven't grasped it all myself. This is very interesting. This is from July 31st, 2012. 2012 was the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. It sank in April of 1912. This is coal from the Titanic. The sample ID is P-TIT for Titanic, and only dated one sample. The laboratory called it a coalified material. The age on the accelerated mass spectrometer was 49,690 plus or minus 640. That's nice and precise.
Wow,
okay?
That's really interesting.
Okay.
So how did they get it? How did they get the coal?
Yeah, this is coal, and they can get a plus or minus, very nice precision.
But how did they get the coal off the Titanic, though?
Yeah, it came from the Titanic. It was dredged up from the Titanic. And here's the sample that I purchased. This is what it contained in this. It says fragile Titanic coal. I bought this at an exhibit that was in Columbus, Ohio, where I live, back about 10, 12 years ago. I kept it around until 2012 for no other reason. I didn't know what the date was. It just happens to be the 100th anniversary. So we broke it up into little pieces. It was only a 1 centimeter square and had been dredged up from about 4,000, 5,000 feet. There it is. Recovered coal from the RMS Titanic, 1994, recovery expedition number 940036. They dredged the bottom of the ocean and brought up the coal. Then they broke it into little pieces and sold it for $20. They didn't know it was going to be used for this. So here's your boarding pass if you want to go down and visit the Titanic, okay?
Yep.
And not really
down there.
$50,000 to take you down in a submersible.
Oh, yeah.
This is certificate of the origin of the coal. This I thought you all, like University of Georgia would love to know this.
Yeah.
They've already said to us that we are anti-science because we have sent them dinosaur bones to be dated, and they refuse to do any more dating for us. But we worked with them for 10 years before they finally cut us off when they learned that we had been sending them dinosaur bones. Yet they gave us the ages for the dinosaur bones and dozens of other specimens we sent them, okay?
Huh.
Nothing up there. It's a blank.
Oh, there's a huge blinders they have on. They can't possibly see anything except for their little narrow path.
Yeah, they're like a horse with blinders on.
That's it.
You said, okay. That's why they used to use the old days that put blinders on horses so they couldn't see the cars running beside them.
Yeah, they didn't freak out and run off.
That.
Yep, that's it.
I think the Amish still put blinders on their horses.
Yeah, they have to. Otherwise, they'll do little swerves on the paddock.
Yeah, right. They'll see a car go by and they'll get scared.
Yeah.
This is an allosaurus, and notice how black the bones are. This is freshly excavated dinosaur bone fragments that we were sent, and we dated it at 31,360 plus or minus 100 years, and we used acetic acid to remove young carbonates. That is, the laboratory did that. There was no collagen in these bones. There's like pieces of stone. You could pick them up and throw them like stones. But there was carbon on the surface and inside the bones.
Huh.
And this came from Jim Hall, who's a collector. He's a professor at a university out east coast. He got these from Colorado, and they were buried on top of the Brontosaurus. So the bodies, the skeletons, were on top of each other. How about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
You imagine the scenario where that would have happened?
Yeah.
I
had a little flood.
Yeah, there's only one I can think of.
Well, they would say a big rivers, a flooding river. Okay.
Oh, well.
This is a big river. All right. So since the late Jurassic, now this is interesting. I have a compatriot named Mike Fisher. He's a fantastic expert on asteroids, and he thinks asteroids may have been involved with the flood, or I think ICR does too, but also with Peleg's time, okay? And with the movement of the Earth rapidly, not slowly like secular science is claiming an inch a year. It's an inch a year now, or a centimeter a year that the continents are moving apart, but they move very rapidly due to some catastrophe of some sort. Now, that's an argument within the abrupt appearance community as to whether it happened during Peleg's time or, which would be 100 or 200 years after the flood, or whether it happened during the flood. We can figure that out if we get the funds to work with. This is important because since the late Jurassic, I'm at the top here, 150 million years ago, 88 new genera of dinosaurs supposedly evolved. 73 new genera of Pleistocene megafauna evolved. That would be mammoths and mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, and so forth. Over 2,000 bird genera evolved supposedly starting 150 million years ago. I mean, it covered the next 150 million years. It didn't all happen at once, of course. That's their theory. Modern mammals with 72 primate genera, including man, was supposed to have slowly evolved too. Okay, that means we are cousins to orangutan, chimpanzees, baboons. I have a granddaughter. I kidded her, called her a funny name, and she called me Baboon. Okay. So I'm known in the family as a baboon, right? But Psittacosaurus, Allosaurus, and Stegosaurus of the alleged 150 million year old late Jurassic, and woolly rhinoceros of 20 million years old before the present, have the same carbon-14 age, and only thousands of years as dated by our beloved University of Georgia Accelerated Mass Spectrometer Lab. As shown in the next slide. This is the rhino. This is a giant rhino, or ancient rhino, I think they call it. They figured them to be 20 million years. The evolutionary years would have been 20 million, yet we got 22,830 dating the bioappetite, the carbon in the bioappetite. Here we dated the carbonate. These labs can collect the carbon dioxide from the carbonate, the burial carbonate, to give you the age of the contaminant. It's marvelous what they can do. University of Georgia is probably one of the more recent laboratories. So they have all the fancy equipment. The carbonate contaminant was older than the skull bone of the rhinoceros from China. Here's the Psittacosaurus, younger supposedly than the rhino, but this is 150 million years old supposedly. And it was 22,000 plus or minus 50. Then we dated the carbonate. I asked them to do this. They dated the carbonate contaminant, and it was contaminated with a younger material, 4,000 years old. You see the importance of pre-treatment to get rid of the contaminants. And you can collect the carbon dioxide and put it into carbon directly and date it. Micrograms. They use micrograms. And mosasaur, this is from the marine reptile in Europe. Same radiocarbon age as our dinosaur bones. This was from around 70 million years old. This laboratory got an age of 24,600. They weren't looking for an age, but God bless them, they reported it. Wow. But they said, oh, there has to be contamination. Okay.
Of course. I'd have to say that, wouldn't I?
Okay, so now we're going to go to depictions. This is on the internet, the detection of two dinosaurs with their necks entwined. It's on the Catholic Bishop Bell's brass crypt from 1496 in Carlisle Cathedral. I think it's in Scotland. It's in Answers in Genesis. And then St. John of Damascus, writing on dragons, called dinosaurs. We call dinosaurs only from 1840s. Prior to 1840s, dinosaurs were known as dragons. So St. John of Damascus, he lived in 700 AD.
Okay.
He was a church doctor of that period, and he had a scientific bent. He worked for a caliph, Muslim caliph, in Istanbul, what is now Istanbul.
When was it taken? It was in the 1200s.
He wrote this paper sometime later in life, but he said the dragons existed. They were arranged from tiny ones up to 35 feet long. He says there was one, according to his records from the 8th century, there was one that the Romans had killed that was 100 feet long, 120 feet long. And they sliced it up and sent the skin to the Roman Senate in 100 BC, roughly. This was during the war of the Romans with Carthage. Carthage was on the African continent. Okay, yeah. So the general in charge said, go kill it. So they eventually killed it. But it was a 4-footer like this, what I understand. and just my estimate. This is what this critter looked like here. The two of them. You see this one? Its heads are right here. Its necks. Now this is a brass crypt. Now, people have been walking on it for 5 centuries, so it's kind of worn. One of the guys from our team went over there and took more pictures, and he studied it. And this is a special kind of a dinosaur. See the tail over here? Got spikes. And so he says there's spikes here. That was on the crypt in 1496. Now this is on the possible Torosaurus dinosaur on the Mosaic floor in Zaporizhia, Israel, AD 300. This particular mansion was destroyed by an earthquake in 300 AD. And so this is the depiction of this Torosaurus type dinosaur with 2 men throwing rocks at it. And this is ostrich or something over here. This is a marvelous mosaic. It's like 30 feet long, and this is on the outer perimeter of the mosaic. At the museum in Montana that is run by Jack Horner, the advisor to Jurassic Park movies, has an exact duplicate skull that with the horns shaped like this. The horns stick up sort of at a curve. When I first saw this, I thought, those are ears, they're not horns. But I went to his website and reconfirmed that they were definitely horns. And there's another horn on the tip of this Torosaurus's nose. So this is a 3-horned dinosaur. Located they may not have seen it in Israel, but somebody has a memory of seeing it. And so they depicted it along with other animals. This is a Peruvian vase with dinosaur depiction. Note the frills. See these frills here? These jagged triangles? They didn't discover the frills till about 1990 on a skeleton of some dinosaurs. But whoever saw this one saw them with their frills. And look at the tail. And these are the legs down here. This is on a vase, and this is from 500 years ago. Oh, I mean, maybe 1,000. I'm not sure. I don't have the exact dates. But they got it from a tribal group in Peru. Again, this is Peru. This is a man. You can see the man here. He's riding a dinosaur. And then he's just chopped off the neck of a smaller dinosaur here. I don't know what's on their mind when they did this, but there's even a dinosaur over here. So there are thousands of these in Peru and thousands of them in Mexico.
Well, when people wonder where the dinosaurs went, I think we're getting a few answers to that. They chopped all their heads off.
Yeah, they have 2 or 3 collection areas. These are stones, and they were buried with humans. So they had a lot of grave robbers, and then they would sell them to collectors. And this one guy who's a doctor, he's a famous doctor in Peru. His mansion is full of these in his basement. They have other depictions too. They have pornography. Okay. Yeah. So man hasn't changed too much. Okay. The Anasazi Indian period. Natural Bridge National Park, USA. I don't know what happened to the legs, but there's a big controversy in Nature magazine because some secular scientists went there. It's about 15, 20 feet high. You need a ladder to get up to examine them closely. Well, they didn't. They just used binoculars and telephoto lenses. And they said, well, this is mud. Does that look like mud to you? Well, but some abrupt appearance scientists went there and they brought a ladder with them. You have to walk a couple miles carrying a ladder. They went up and examined it, and these are impingements. Somebody used a stone to impinge little holes in here to draw this depiction. It must have taken them a long time to do that.
How high is that? What size?
It's only about a foot, I think, long. Too long. But it's there along with other depictions.
Right.
Now here is one, a kind of a side view. This is in the Havai-Supai Canyon of the Grand Canyon. The Dahomey Scientific Expedition ran 2 expeditions there. Prehistoric Man is the name of this. And he says, these were secular scientists from 1800s, late 1800s. And they said early man must have seen dinosaurs. And they figured at that time, early man may have lived as long as 25 million years ago. I have this report. They did an excellent job of studying this. Again, it's about 15 feet up. The canyon below it was probably eroded out during flood times, heavy rains. Now, this city emblem of Kazan, 6th largest city in Russia, it's the home of the University of Kazan with 16,000 students. This is their city emblem, three-toed, like dinosaurs with a little heel. This is a typical looking dinosaur, but they embellish it with wings and give it a crown. This has been known for about 1,500 years. They use that for a long time as their city emblem. Here's graffiti on a train in Rome when we were there in 2009. So man hasn't changed, except he makes graffiti and you don't know what it is. But back in those days when the people were trying to explain to their descendants what they saw, these are true depictions as best as they could describe them. Now here, this is on the floor of the Vatican. I took a tour of the Vatican, and on the floor is a depiction characteristic. The head is characteristic of a dinosaur or a dragon. And they got one of these over in, looks just like this, from Montana. It's in a children's museum in Indianapolis now. Huh. And the skull looks like this. When they did a scale up by an artist. The rest of this is embellishment. We don't know what that is, but it's got wings. This is the family emblem for a pope that died maybe 500, 600 years ago. So he's buried in the Vatican in a esophagus like the one in Carlisle Cathedral in England. That's the way they used to put all the top dog, top clergy, bury them in churches. I had to take a picture of this. I couldn't resist it. I've never expected to see something that's on the floor of the Vatican. These are sketches from 1982 to 1984 of excavations being held along the Paluxy River near Glen Rose, Texas, about 60 miles from Dallas, Fort Worth metropolis. 1982, Carl Ball, who is infamous from an evolutionist point of view and famous as far as I'm concerned as a man who is very dedicated. He's now got a real nice museum next to the Paluxy River, and I was instrumental in helping him buy the land indirectly because the landowner kept wanting to sell land to continue living there. So he sold. Eventually, Carl Ball found the money, and so he bought the 5 acres and built his museum. But while he was trying to get the money and doing all that, he excavated these footprints down here. He convinced the landowner, the grandfather of the current one, to take off the top strata, which contained only 5 dinosaur footprints. These are strata that are on the riverbank. So the river, in all these pictures, the river is over here. I'll show you a picture of the river pretty soon. But he found 12 human-like footprints adjacent to these dinosaur footprints. Look way over here in the far corner. This is a human footprint with a dinosaur one, and you go all the way up here, and here's what it looks like. It was full of water because it had rain or spring water was being fed to the area. This is a human footprint, 16 inches long with toe tips. This is the dinosaur footprint, which he's pointing to that dinosaur footprint. This was a Acrocanthosaurus, later identified as an Acrocanthosaurus, a bipedal dinosaur similar to T-Rex, but from the 110 million year old Cretaceous, mid-Cretaceous strata. We dated this dinosaur bone that was found 2 miles upstream. The actual skeleton of one of them was found upstream. It was a juvenile. And we dated its bones, 5 different samples, and they all came in the range of 23,000 to 31,000 years. We came on the scene in the second sketch. We went down there in 1983. Remember, this was 1982. This is 1983. We followed this footprint and discovered this one. I think it was this one here, yeah. He invited us down, and we went down there with my 3 boys and another gentleman, and a Church of Christ minister paid for our trip, for a rented car and everything. And we found this one. In 1988, remember, this is sporadic. There's no money available, hardly at all. You grab $500 when you can, or $1,000, and go down there. Carl Ball did the same thing for years.
I think you've answered just in that statement why there's not many scientists who are willing to speak up about this.
Yeah.
All
these footprints erode also very quickly. Now, when we came down, we saw this trail, left, right, and then this one was on the riverbank. Only half of it was available. This guy had a 23-inch long footprint. He had to be 12 feet tall. The one we discovered, or uncovered, I should say, in the next strata was 11 inches long, characteristic of I don't know if you're 6 feet tall, and this would be about your size of your foot. 6'2", something like that. Mine is 10.5. And we had a podiatrist do a study for us of 10 males, 10 females, and human ones, obviously. And he got aspect ratios. We checked them against famous author who was an expert on human feet, and they were exactly the same. One we found, and these here were exactly the same. These had been discovered a week before we got there. So when we walked in and saw these on a Sunday before July the 4th of that year, we couldn't believe it. We wondered, what are we getting into here? You know, is this a fake operation? Well, when we took off the 12 inches of rock and 3 inches of clay, the 4 of us working together, 5 of us with Carl Ball, it became obvious. These were correct footprints, and these are. There's no fakey stuff going on down here. They discovered over 80 footprints since 1982, but we haven't found any more on the 3rd strata. We're down now to the 3rd strata, and there's none there so far. But we have found dinosaur footprints on the 3rd strata. And of course, in the river itself, there are supposed to be footprints. Secular scientist who was a theistic evolutionist came down and destroyed the best of the footprints in the river with a crowbar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the sketch that started us going. And Carl Ball, unfortunately, he had a fire, and I think these sketches were burned, and he lost so much in the fire. So all the early stuff was destroyed. I think he had the fire back around 2011, 2012. So I happened just to have he gave me these sketches, so I put them on the internet for us.
Oh, good.
So this is the one we excavated 1 hour after discovery of 1983 Bebb or Sir George. We weren't sure whether a female or a male made the footprints. I think he thinks the male did. But this is a 108 million year old Cretaceous strata. You can see the footprints, the toe tips, big toe. You know, this is a right foot. Next one, next one, next one.
Being 6 foot, he might have been actually younger, because back then they would have grown a lot bigger, I'm guessing. People, I mean.
Well, of course, the evolutionists say the early hominids were small people, small apes like Peter. We're finding down here, these are conventional human footprints with some giants. And giants are mentioned in the Bible, so I don't know what we got here. But you see the distinct heel on the mold that we made, and then the arch goes out like this. Aspect ratios were precise agreement with the podiatrist that we used and the famous lady who was an anthropologist who studied human feet. So she went over to Africa and confirmed that the African footprints that they found were made by humans. Okay, they didn't know because they didn't have very many toe tips like we have down here. We have toe tips on many of them, but not on all of them, unfortunately. Now, this is a handprint from the Fort Worth, Texas area. This is like 50, 60 miles away. There are footprints in the Trinity River that were discovered 50 years ago of humans. So they were all over Texas, New Mexico, etc.
So that handprint was from Texas, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is the gentleman paleontologist who made the mold from this stone here. This is the stone, it was cut out. He made a rubberized mold. When he pulled it out, you know, they're really soft, so we can pull it out, and you end up with a mold. Then you make more casts from the mold.
Yeah, okay.
So this handprint, the middle finger had a distinct nail, and it was manicured.
Oh, really?
He looked at it, he says, hey, it's a manicured fingernail.
What?
All right. And so this is somebody else's hand here, but you can see the resemblance is very striking. All right. And this was a big hand, and this guy has a big hand. My hand, I can't put my hand in here. This had to be a pretty big guy, maybe 6'5", something like that.
Yeah.
Now this was in 1989. We were trying to follow the footprints from the sketches I showed you from 1982. They disappeared under some rocks. And we took the rock off thinking we were going to continue the trail. The trail did not continue. We had the dinosaur footprints disappeared and the human footprints disappeared. No more. The theory is that the material that they walked on set up rapidly. Maybe the footprints that they made previously to that, they were now walking on area that had set up the concrete. The concrete sets up in hours. So we think all these footprints were made simultaneously. Well, We spent a couple $1,000 with heavy duty equipment and everything. I only found one human footprint. We expected to find a flock of them, but we did find this one. It was 13.5 inches long, toe tips, and the dinosaur coming the other way had pushed mud into the arch of the human one. This is the dinosaur one.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And this, we found this in 1989, 6 years later. So we didn't go home empty-handed, but at least found this. It was going in the opposite direction of the other human footprints. And it was in a depression, not a deep depression, just a shallow depression. And there was only one dinosaur footprint and only one human footprint.
To find footprints at all is a pretty amazing thing in the first place, because they'd be fairly hard to preserve, really.
Yeah. You have to have a lot of luck.
Yeah.
In Africa, there's now, I think there's 3 sets of footprints in Africa now. And we got this one in the United States. There's some down in New Mexico, next state over from Texas. But he chased our guys away with a shotgun because it was his private property. I mean, you've got all kind of problems trying to do good science, you know?
Yeah.
Now this is the Paluxy River, so this may be the first time you've seen this one, but this area is 1982 to 2009. This whole area here was subjected to various expeditions, and this is primarily from 1982 to 2009. I think they didn't do any in here, they just jumped ahead over here. This river is dropping at 17 feet per mile. So it's the second fastest river in Texas. So where they have a flood, man, they have a flood, okay?
And so the footprints would wear off very rapidly, wouldn't they?
They, depending on the condition of the lining mud that was originally set down. The footprints over here, which you can't see this, but these are where the footprints called the Taylor Trail were, and several others that the McFall landowners found back decades ago. Those footprints were still in existence in 1999. And you can see the toe tips of one of them anyway.
Okay, so obviously very hard rock.
The difference between the strata that we're working with the last 30, 40 years and what they discovered in the river is that ours, the limy mud that was laid down in our area, the edge of the river, the cliffs, were full of holes, porous, very porous, and allowed water to erode away the footprints very rapidly.
Okay.
Okay? But in the river, that particular strata where these footprints were found did not erode. And the dinosaur footprints, there was a beautiful set of dinosaur footprints. It just winds down the river. I don't have a picture of it. I have a picture somewhere. It's like 50-some dinosaur footprints. Single dinosaur. And they're all in perfect shape. Some erosion, but basically the 3-toed acrocanthosaurus. Footprints were on every strata, maybe 8 or 10 strata down. This is the flood of Noah, laying down 2 strata per day, roughly. So this goes down 1,000 feet. So what have we got down 1,000 feet? Well, no one's going to go down there and dig that far, but anyway.
Divert the river to do that one.
Yeah, the river was developed probably as a depression, and as the water went off, it just tore up what was wet, limey mud at the time, making the river. Probably how all the rivers formed everywhere. You got valleys, and in the valley, there's usually a river. Well, that valley may have been full of water one time, running off to deep basins. There's basins everywhere. This is a whole footprint scenario in Texas, except for the dinosaurs, is controversial. They agree that the dinosaurs made the footprints. They've never seen a dinosaur. They say there's a dinosaur footprints. But they've seen their own feet and other footprints, other people's feet. And they say, well, that can't be human. It's a mistake. It's a misinterpretation. It's fake.
It's contamination.
I mean, you talk about blinders. Good heavens. So Carl Ball, in 2008 or so, over time, various landowners would bring in footprints that they had found decades before. Went down into the part of the family inheritance or whatever. So this is one that he decided, well, let's CAT scan it. He took it to the local hospital or medical lab. They had a CAT scanner. So they scanned these original limey mud or whatever they're made out of, sands and limey mud, and they discovered impressions made by the pressure of the dinosaur and the human making the footprints. So these two were CAT scanned to demonstrate compression features under the tracks, showing both artifacts are genuine. The Delk footprint, that's this one here, with the dinosaur footprint, pushing mud into the human footprint, like I showed you earlier. Okay.
I just saw that then. I didn't see the human footprint up the top. Now I do. Okay.
The human came, looks like they're not sure. The human came through first because the heel messed up the dinosaur footprint. And here, the dinosaurs pushed, well, this could be, yeah, I think the dinosaur came first. Maybe that's what they're trying to tell us. And so this was so deep that when the human made the footprint, he could not push the mud down. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it could be either.
It could be either, right. But the fact that this toe tip doesn't exist anymore, and it was lining mud at the time, they only made these footprints minutes or hours apart.
One thing I can tell you is they're not 65 million years apart. That's one thing I can be certain of, but beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. But anyway, this is a beautiful footprint. This is from the panhandle of Texas, 300 miles away. This oil worker found this about 30, 40 years ago, and he cut it out, and he found a trackway. Meanwhile, other people from all over came along and took out the rest of them, but he got the best one. And it was sitting in the city hall of this one town, 300 miles away, as something that the original landowner gave to the city. And they had it in a shelf. And one of Carl Ball's associates went up there to deliver something to them, and he saw the footprint. And so they brought it back to Texas eventually and ran the CAT scan. So there were compression features under the tracks. This is from our Italian friend who arranged that meeting for us at the National Research Council of Italy. His name is Roberto Di Mattai. I remember his name now. He has a publication. He's a very devout Catholic, and as many of them are in Italy, although they've got a lot of atheists now there. He invited us, and he writes a publication called Lepanto. And remember, you ever heard about Lepanto, what it's all about?
No, not really, no.
Well, back in the 15th century, there was a battle. Ships of the Italians, the various city-states, including the Vatican, formed a fleet to stop the Turks from invading Italy.
Okay.
There was a big invasion plan, tens of thousands of troops on the Turkish ships. And they're heading towards Italy because they had already captured one country in Europe, a couple of countries.
They captured Spain, I thought, number of places, the Muslims.
Yeah, well, what happened was Lepanto is the area where the two fleets met and had a battle. The Italians won, okay, and stopped the invasion of Italy.
And that's why you don't speak Arabic.
Yeah, that's right. So Lepanto is the name of the battle. So he's written a magazine, and he talks about church history and early Christianity and all that. He's a historian. And so this is one of his publications. After we gave our presentation, about 6 months later, I got a copy of this magazine. I was delighted, so I put it on the internet. It shows Darwin falling off his pedestal. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty obvious. Well, here's the conclusion that we came to. And this, we gave a presentation at the Creation Research Science Convention in 2016 in Michigan, at Michigan University. Mike Fisher, my friend who I mentioned earlier, mainly wrote this paper based upon the data that we had developed, is while it may not be possible to conclusively prove which theory of origins, evolution, intelligent design, or abrupt appearance, produced the biosphere, life in all its forms, and even Earth and the universe by cosmological inferences, it is not possible to determine which did not, leaving the other standing by the process of elimination. It's called eliminative induction. The guy's very clever. And eliminative induction, at the bottom here, I said modern definition of eliminative deduction in science means reproducible experiments and reputable observation. That's why we can eliminate evolution, we think. So evolution requires millions of years for the development of all species, not in the fossil record, but those ages needed for evolution to happen do not exist. From at least the late Jurassic period, assumed to be 150 million years ago, to the present based upon one, the existence of soft tissue and collagen in some dinosaur bones. 2, carbon-14 in all dinosaur bones tested thus far, about 15 to 20 by 3 groups. 3, hundreds of dinosaur depictions found on all continents, even Australia. We talked about that last time. I think the Aborigines have a depiction. Yep. 4, fossil human dinosaur footprints together in mid-Cretaceous strata and human footprints in other formations, not only in the Cretaceous and the Devonian, like up in northern Texas, and other strata. These strata were laid down simultaneously over a period of 8 months. 5, studies showing that sedimentary strata form simultaneously rather than sequentially from moving waters. In other words, the top strata is not younger necessarily than the strata underneath it, okay? Yeah. Taken together, the physical evidence indicates that fossils in middle Mesozoic and higher strata were buried less than 40,000 years ago. Host of animals that makes their first appearance in the fossil record, and these strata could not have evolved in such a short time. Without its required long ages, evolution theory in both its theistic and atheistic forms, blinders, can be ruled out as an explanation for the creation of all living things, leaving intelligent design and abrupt appearance theories of origin by the God of the Bible and his word as the only theory still standing through eliminative induction. Now, I have to bring in this one Pope, a very devout Christian, if there ever was one. This is the key portion of Pope Leo's summary in his encyclical Providentissimus Deus. And this is from 1893, when the Masons and the atheists, or the Masons and the evolutionists, were really ripping creation and Christianity apart with their new studies of the ancient Israel and claiming that stuff in the Bible were not true, not historically accurate. And so he says, in order that all these endeavors and exertions may really prove advantageous to the cause of the Bible, let scholars keep steadfastly to the principle which we have laid down in this letter. Let them loyally hold that God, the creator and ruler of all things, is also the author of the scriptures, and that therefore nothing can be proved either by physical science or archaeology which can really contradict the scriptures. If then apparent contradiction be met with, every effort should be made to remove it. And I speak of Louis Pasteur and Francisco Redi, Answers in Genesis, ICR. This is what we have tried to do here by our research into the physical sciences and archaeology, covering up to 45 years of research when time and funds permit, of course. We need to bring our young people into this and get them to continue the research, okay? Yeah. This is just something, to give you a little humor here. This is called the Church of Dana. Follow along and no one gets hurt. Be academically correct or lose your job. So this studious looking boy is saying, let me get this straight. You want me to cherry pick science to use as evidence that the stuff you just made up is factual? Yes, please. Well, the science community has a term for that kind of practice. Dana? She's wonderful at that. She says, mainstream science? I was going for intellectual dishonesty, but that works too. Okay? I couldn't resist that cartoon. I had to show it. That's what we're fighting here.
It's so true.
All right. I think that is it for today.
Very good.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you, and I enjoy giving this presentation. I hope I haven't been too hard on the horses with the blinders on them, but you know, they've got to be hit over the head with a dinosaur bone to get their attention.
Thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated.
All right.
All right.
God bless.
God bless. I'll see you next time.
Right.
Bye.